Hi, I'm Ted Baldwin. Welcome to Inside Louisiana News at InsideLouisianaNews.com. Our guest today is Jay Dardenne, Secretary of State of Louisiana. Jay, welcome.
Thanks, Ted.
Glad you're with us.
Nice to be with you.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your career, how you got started. Student government at LSU, is that right?
Well, I hate to think of that as my beginning in politics, but I was president of the student body at LSU in the late 70s, and I was a member of the Metropolitan Council for several years, 1988 to 91, and was in the Senate for 15 years, and have been Secretary of State since 2006.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your career as an elected official. What are you most proud of in your career?
Well, there are a lot of things I would say I'm proud of. Going all the way back to being on the Metro Council in Baton Rouge was where you really make effective changes that help people. And I drafted a flood damage prevention ordinance here in Baton Rouge after we had a very serious flood in 1988. And every house that's been built in Baton Rouge since that ordinance was enacted has withstood floodwaters. And I'm very proud of that because it's an accomplishment that shows how you can get something done in a responsible way, bringing people together and talking about how to make improvements in people's lives. And there were a lot of things in the state Senate that I'm quite proud of. I authored the motion picture tax credit legislation that really created an industry, a new industry for Louisiana. I wrote the law that created the single board of ethics. I wrote the law that created the community and technical college system in Louisiana, constitutional amendments for term limits and coastal erosion protection, victims' rights in our criminal courtrooms. So there are a lot of things that I could point to that I feel like have been beneficial for the people of Louisiana.
Was there anything in particular that you fought for that you didn't achieve, that you would like to have seen?
I don't think anybody who's ever been in public office can say that they never lost any fights. Certainly a lot of the ethics law advancements that I was advocating in the 1990s did not come to fruition during my time in the state Senate. Some of them have been implemented since I left. But that's one thing I would point to that I wish we could have accomplished much earlier on in my legislative career.
There's a public perception of politics, and the Secretary of State's position really isn't glamorized, as near as I can tell. I mean, what does the job entail obviously you're forced in Louisiana election laws and election management?
There are three different facets to the job, and the primary one, of course, is elections. And by law, in fact, it was a law that I authored in the Senate, the Secretary of State cannot be involved in partisan politics. He can only be involved in his own campaign. And so the Secretary of State in Louisiana has to conduct himself in a bipartisan and fair way, which is the way it ought to be. You ought to be about ensuring the integrity of the election and fairness for everyone. We manage elections in Louisiana along with the 64 clerks of court and 64 registrars of voters, and that's a very big job. And people go into the voting booth and they're there for a couple of minutes and then they leave and go about their business, but there's an awful lot of work that has gone into preparing for that short time in the election booth and making certain that the process is layered with integrity and confidence. So we spend a lot of time dealing with elections and election laws and procedures. We manage 17 museums, including the state archives as well, so we have a historical component to this office, which is a lot of fun for me and that I've taken a great deal of interest in. We've created something called the Heroes and Heritage Trail that links all 17 of our museums because they're ripe with Louisiana's history and celebrating our heroes. And that's been a great project that we've undertaken at no real cost. We don't have a marketing budget in our department, so we have to do it all in creative and innovative ways. And thirdly, we deal with commercial business filings in Louisiana. If you're going to create an entity to do business in Louisiana, you have to register with our office. And we handle all those filings. So there are a lot of different facets to the job.
Of course, the internet has come along, and it's changed the way we do everything here in
Sure.
film and in television. Were the changes foreseen in the Secretary of State's office? Are you playing catch-up? Are you ahead of the curve as far as information flow goes? How's that working?
We like to think we're ahead of the curve, and I think we are. If you look at where we are comparably with a lot of other states, we were able to implement internet filing in our commercial section just about a year and a half ago, and it's been a huge success and very well received by the public. You can create a new business entity in Louisiana on the internet now. You can file your annual reports on the internet. And I'm hopeful that in the future the office will be able to expand to do even more of the commercial business filings on the internet. And certainly in the elections area there is involvement of computers and the internet to some extent. We don't vote by internet now, and we shouldn't as far as I'm concerned, but there have been a lot of additional transmissions that are available because of the speed available through the internet in the election process, short of voting.
Anything on the horizon that information technology is going to change?
I think it's going to continue to change the way we look at the delivery of information to the people, and that affects our office in the commercial area, and it affects our office in the elections area. When I took office, you didn't have the expectation of virtually instantaneous election results on election night. Now we have a virtual expectation that we're going to know almost immediately when the polls close who won. And that's a little bit of an over-expectation, but we now are able to give people election night results within an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours of the polls closing, which was really unheard of just a few short years ago.
I think there's a potential for great fraud in an electronic system, but also you can also watchdog better with the way the system is now, or how's that? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think a lot of people share your concern, and that's why I think America, and certainly Louisiana, is going to move very, very slowly as we determine whether or not there's enough security available on the internet to be able to vote. And remember, we're not on the internet. You wouldn't be on the internet when you vote. You'd be in a closed, contained system with a great deal of integrity and safeguards built in. But I think there are still some concerns about the overexpansion of the ability to do things on the internet. And I think that's going to continue for a while, and we're going to have to evolve, I think, before we get to that point.
Control of information is a kind of a concern, it seems like, for the current administration, national administration. The Fairness Doctrine, localism, as they're calling it now, which is to try and wrest power away from people that are in power and give it to people that want power. You've been attacked with internet animations in your recent campaign. What are your thoughts on political speech, private speech, the internet?
Well, I certainly believe in protecting political discourse and political free speech, even when it's painful and unfair and inaccurate, unfortunately, about a candidate. You have to be very careful about trying to regulate political speech to such a degree that it inhibits the free expression that's guaranteed in our Constitution. By the same token, the internet has freed many people to suddenly become so-called self-proclaimed experts or information purveyors that in a way can be very harmful to those seeking public office. And that's, I think, a concern and ought to be a concern to everybody. But as with most things, you have to look for a balance. I do not believe we ought to be about limiting free speech, and has been discussed on the national level, concerns about limiting, for example, conservative talk radio, something that's not particularly in favor with the existing administration, that's led to some discussions about how perhaps the Fairness Doctrine ought to limit debate, and I think that's a very dangerous thing. I think our country was founded on free speech, and it needs to be protected even with this new wave of communication abilities that are out there.
I think the next question that I have here is, should anyone have the power to shut down the internet, and if so, for what reason, or if not, why not?
Well, I don't know that anybody should have the power to shut down the internet. I mean, obviously you have limits on free speech when it comes to pornography, when it comes to libelous, false information, and there are remedies available in court. And I think this is going to be, as I say, an evolving discussion as we go forward, as concerns are raised, and how there is appropriate safeguards on what is available without impinging on people's ability to speak freely.